Oklahoma State could very well be much more talented at wide receiver than last year because every single player on the field has a job every single play.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. We are available on every single podcasting platform as well as visually on YouTube. And you can find me personally on Twitter at AllDayOState. Today we are brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook betting partner for a reason. All right, so if you can see up there, what we got to cover today is wide receiver. This got brought up in conversation today when I attempted to host a Twitter space on my way to a baseball tournament. As you can see, we're in Wichita. We're hotel living. And for everybody out there who says my pop filter hides my face too much, here you go. Here it is. All right. So the wide receiver room this year could potentially be, dare I say, better. We're definitely not deeper. All right. I want to dispel that myth right off the get-go. We're not deeper than we were last season. That's very fair. But from a talent perspective, we not only could be better, but we could potentially flourish in this new offense. Now, somebody had mentioned earlier that it's possible that the wide receiver room has less production than last year due to the simplicity of the offense. I would say potentially otherwise right there, because it means that the wide receivers are going to have to do more. With less opportunities, you have to capitalize a little bit more. And we all know this season is 100% contingent upon capitalization. If, I know it's a massive if because we got the gift of all time in the schedule, but if Mike Gundy finds a way to trip and fall over his mullet and we do not win over 7 games, this conversation changes entirely. But right now, let's take a look at some of the wide receivers, right? And what we have coming compared to what we've lost. We've kind of done some of this comparison and analysis before. But when you look at this season, are we going to do a bunch of 4 or 5 wide? No, we're not. We're going to do some 3 wide. You're going to have your traditional slot. You're going to have an X. You're going to have a Z. We have a good idea who's going to play those positions. Right now, this spring, DeJon Stribling looks better than advertised. When you go back and look at the film from him at Washington State, you saw a lot of the capabilities in route running, right? But what you didn't always see is yards after catch. What you didn't always see is instantaneous separation. He's getting that in Stillwater. Now, is that untapped potential? Possibly. Is it body by glass working its magic? I would say that's very possible as well. But he is somebody that everybody should be pretty daggone excited about. Somebody else that we lost last year that was brought up earlier was Bryson Green. Bryson Green was good at making very acrobatic catches. But if you go back and you look at the highlights of the season, there are several instances where you see Bryson Green giving up on plays. And I had somebody tell me earlier, and this is a challenge to everybody out there. You please find me an offensive coordinator that tells the opposite side receiver that he don't have a job. Like, I understand that plays are designed to go to certain sides of the field, which is why you have reads as a quarterback. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have your check down options as well. This year, our check down options are not going to only be at tailback, also at fullback, but we're using a true tight end. So what Leon Johnson III can provide from a wide receiver perspective, we already have a tight end in Josiah Johnson. And realistically, if you wanted to throw Ian Edenfield out there, we'd be fine. If you wanted to throw Quentin Stewart in there, we'd be fine. And from a fullback perspective, Braden Cassidy is the next coming of Bryant Ward or Kai Staley. You can almost mark it down, write it down, take it to the bank. You can bet on it in FanDuel. The wide receiver room, again, not deeper, but possibly better. And every single player on the field has a job to do every single snap. If somebody tells you otherwise, they might be high on life, a little bit too high on life. Because even if the play is to the opposite side of the field, you're still part of the equation. If it's a bubble screen or a tunnel screen to the wide side of the field, on the short side of the field, you still have a job to do. Whether it's blocking, whether it's running a 9 route, whether it's running a slant route, whether it's cracked back into the linebacker, you always have a responsibility on the field. And I don't want to make the correlation entirely to baseball until the end, But from a baseball perspective, it's the same thing. I get so irate at a baseball game when I see players standing there. There's never a time in the game, except for when the pitch is being pitched, that a baseball player should be standing. Every other time, he should be moving. It's the same in football. You cannot sit here and tell me to my face that it's okay for players not to run routes, for players not to get on a blocking assignment, for somebody not to help get to the second level, to help not manipulate the safety's eyes, or at least cheat him to one side of the field to buy more time on the strong side of the field. It's preposterous. And this season, we have the wide receivers to get it done. As I mentioned already, Leon Johnson III, I do fancy him as a Marcel Aitman type. I see him as a potential red zone target. Yeah, being 6'5", 207 pounds probably helps in that department. But he was a man amongst boys in the beginning of spring. When we put on pads, it changed a little bit, but that's fine. If you want another red zone threat that can also take the top off the defense, that's going to be Jaden Bray. One of the things that I think all of us have noticed in our fandom of Oklahoma State, especially from an offensive perspective, is we do get too reliant on that one receiver, right? And it's typically going to be the Z receiver in Stillwater. This year, that should be Jaden Bray. And as long as he's healthy, we're fine. But the difference is we're going to have other options. As I've said before, if you want to go look at the 2014, 13, 12 type of film, that's going to give you a much better representation of what Oklahoma State offense is going to look like this season than anything in the last few years. Even if you go back to Mason Rudolph, it's not the same system. And I do think that the simplicity of this style will give us the ability to not be so reliant on that one guy. I've said it before. You want to trace back to the Josh Coopers, the David Gliddens, the Bo Bowlings, the Julian Edelmans, if you will. That's what you really want of a slot receiver. The last thing you really want out of a slot receiver is running 16 to 18 to 20-yard routes on a consistent basis, especially last season when you knew we had some limitations to the offensive line. Spencer Sanders was running for his life half the time. Why make it by design, right? Sometimes it seemed like he had two reads, and number 3 was take off. Number 3 was get out of the way. Number 3 was elude the pocket. The offensive line is too deep for the first time since I can think of, since going back to maybe when Joe Wickline was here. And Joe Wickline did not leave us in a very good situation. Joe Wickline decided not to recruit his wazoo off that for the last couple of years before he left Oklahoma State to go to Texas. People say that our offensive line hasn't been the same since. I don't know if I go that far. We have had a 2,000-yard rusher recently in Chuba Hubbard. We all noticed what Justice Hill was able to do. Jalen Warren, although I will argue Jalen Warren did a lot of that on his own. You see that in the NFL as well. Is his offensive line in the NFL better than it was at Stillwater? Yeah, for sure. But you're still seeing him having to make a lot out of nothing in the backfield. That is typically reminiscent of you having struggles in the offensive line position. Whether that be talent, whether it be depth, it really doesn't matter. You got to have a running back that is elusive enough to always be going north-south and kind of counterbalance the necessity of going east to west. From a running back room, we've already covered that a little bit. We'll get into it more a little bit later. I think we're fine there. But again, wide receiver room could be, dare I say, better. I don't know if I want to go that far, but the talent is going to be more than replicable. We will not miss Bryson Green, I'm telling you, because the guys that we have now that are playing that backside receiver, they're going to run the routes. They're going to catch their blocks. They're going to get to the second level. They're going to help manipulate the eyes of the safety, even if they know they're read number 4, read number 5. I don't care if they're read number 79. You have a job to do. If you didn't have a job to do, you wouldn't be on a football field. And just like all of you have a job to do right now, and that job for you is to go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and get yourself hooked up with our no sweat first bet. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. You can get your hands on up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. I'm here living the hotel life at a baseball tournament. We get to participate. My son playing in my alma mater. That's always cool. But while we're in the full swing of baseball season, you need to capitalize on your capability to make the dollar bills, y'all. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. Get your hands on the no sweat first bet because FanDuel is the #1 sportsbook betting partner for a reason. All righty, so again, Arlen Bruce is going to be somebody who could come in, not only a slot receiver. What I find interesting about Arlen Bruce is we're using him a lot in the backfield as well. I don't know if it's a tinker toy type of thing, but I don't really care either. If it's double reverses, if we're going Boise State, Liberty type of plays, I'm fine with that as well because he has mobility that we haven't seen in a long time. Brennan Presley is an NFL caliber wide receiver. I think everybody that rocks the orange and black is very well aware of that. I think we also know that he's been a little underutilized in his time in Stillwater. Now, is that just an offensive design flaw, or is it something to do with Spencer Sanders? I think you could argue both. I think you could say maybe both are applicable in this situation. But Brennan Presley is going to produce this year. I do, again, find him being able to sit down in the zone. If you go back and look at the Fiesta Bowl against Notre Dame, we had to put pedal to the metal offensively, right? We had to get a little bit more creative in the offensive play calling. And you saw Brennan Presley settled down in zone very well. Whenever they would go man, he would exploit that as well. Brennan Presley is a weapon that I don't think we've seen fully utilized yet. And Arlen Bruce is going to be the same thing in return anytime BP is not on the field, or God forbid for the defense if they put him on the field together. It's going to be a problem. We already talked about Jaden Bray. Everybody knows he's the Justin Blackman, Tylen Wallace, Des Bryant, Tay Martin style guy of the bunch. And then you got Leon Johnson III, who I think is going to be a massive red zone threat. And we're not even talking about Talon Shetron. Talon Shetron will not only play, but he'll be massively productive this season. I think last year was a good building block for him. He had a good spring. It's just he kind of got overshadowed by BP and Bray. And I am still obviously a firm believer that the tight end position will flourish. Finally, I know Oklahoma State fans, we've been wishing and hoping upon falling stars forever that we use tight ends again. I think this is the time. And then DeJon Stribling, better than advertised. So the wide receiver room, again, we're nowhere near as deep, which could potentially bite us, yes. But from a talent perspective, in and of itself, we're fine, ladies and gentlemen. We are in a good shape. And these wide receivers have to capitalize more on their opportunities because they're not going to get as many balls. We're not throwing the ball 55, 65, 75 times a game. It ain't happening. The running game will lead us to a lot of things. And we all know that if the running game is working, the defense has to put another man in the box. Whether they're running a 4-2-5, some sort of a shell. If they go to a 3-3-5 with a nickel guy, they're screwed. If they go to a 3-3-5 with a linebacker guy that's not fast enough to cover, then they're screwed again. So this season should be a very good indication of what Gundy typically does on a down year. And I will tell you, I don't like y'all out there that got me defending Gundy all the daggone time recently because I expect more of Oklahoma State. I expect Gundy to perform at the level that he's created. He has raised the bar. He has made the ceiling what it is. But occasionally, you got to bust through the ceiling. So I hold that expectation. But I also hold the expectation of realization that this season is considerably different. The locker room's different. The coaching staff's different. Oh, shout out to my boy OT. He says I don't mention him enough, so I will mention him here. Joe Bob Clements is a bad mamma jamma. Joe Bob Clements is definitely out on the recruiting trail, helping Coach Nardo land some of these big-time linebackers that we have been getting, the ones that we're going to get. By the way, shout out to Armstrong Nodum. I knew it was coming. I just I didn't know it would be after the call date, so I apologize being late there. If you guys saw earlier, Bo Tate just committed to Baylor. Kylan Reed also is going elsewhere. Don't stress. Don't stress, ladies and gentlemen. To me, that just means the door is now more open for Tamarick Johnson to come to Oklahoma State. The door is now more open for Jonathan Aguimudu to also come to Oklahoma State. Those are two guys, 6'2", 215 pounds, 6'3", 220 pounds, that are coming in ready to rock and roll. Body by glass will flourish with those young men. So don't stress about the loss of Bo Tate. Congratulations to Armstrong Nodum. I'm a fan. Armstrong Nodum is going to be a beast. Again, he's the Siake Ika type, the Justin Kirkland type, the guy you need in the middle to plug up the gaps. If you're going to run a 3-3-5, nose tackle is of paramount importance. If you do not have that guy that can eat up double teams and free up the linebackers and safeties for different blitz packages and concepts where they can, stretch plays out east to west, you're doing yourself a disservice. So Justin Kirkland is going to be the biggest key, I think, this year defensively for us. We all know how good Colin Oliver is. We all know how good Kendall Daniels is. I think we all are very well aware of how deep we are at the safety position. I expect Lyric Rawls to have a massive season. I expect Trey Rucker to not only have a massive season, but he'll also have a couple massive penalties. He just plays that way. It's not going to be purposeful, but you can go back a little bit and think of a Calvin Bundage, right? Playing the game at 197 miles an hour. You got to have a little bit of slowdown. But again, you would rather have to reel somebody in that's doing too much and going too hard than push somebody constantly to do better, to be better, to strive for more. So you'd always rather reel them back in as opposed to try to push them back out. So this is a good problem to have. All right, so another thing that was brought up, we'll move on to the quarterback room. And this is going to be a long one. You ready for this? I have no reservations. Ta-da. That's it. I have almost zero reservations in this quarterback room. That either means Cody's crazy or Cody has no idea what he's talking about, or we're going to find out this season. It's one of the two. And I'm fine because I'm very well aware that in this job, people come to pull receipts. I get that. And just like I said earlier on the Twitter space, either our quarterbacks are pretty daggone good and they've developed quite a daggone bit, or our defense is horrendous. It's one of those two. And I really don't think our defense is bad at all. So that must mean that Alan Bowman, Garrett Rangel, Gunnar Gundy have improved pretty dramatically. I think people look at Gunnar Gundy, and I hate how much shade some of these young men get. I don't even get it. Like, you go back and you look at last year's game, people have a negative perception of Gunnar Gundy primarily because of K-State. If you go look back at the K-State game, you see him in the game and his hands are shaking when he's in the shotgun about to take a snap on national TV. Not a good look. I agree. But let's check this out. Hold my beer. If you're my dad and we're down 48-0, don't put me in the game. What are you doing? What do you expect me to do in my first snaps ever in big-time college football, down 48-0 at a jam-packed Manhattan crowd? Come on, man. I mean, it's the same thing. If you leave pitcher in way too long, you're killing his confidence. Screw his stat sheet. That don't matter. You're killing the kid's confidence. It's the same thing we did. And then he gets his first official start against Iowa State, the number one defense in the Big 12, a top 10 defense in the United States of America. Those are not advantageous situations to be put in, especially when you take into consideration, they have the bum shoulder type of situation. The way we've handled injuries and stuff has been updated, right? We're not living in the old school days anymore. Thank goodness. That absolutely had to happen. But the hate our quarterback room gets is, I don't get it. It's absolutely ridiculous to me. People want to say that Garrett Rangel can't play Division I football. I find it cute. People want to say that Gunnar Gundy has no business in Division I football. Well, he came back from his shoulder injury 3 days before the scrimmage and tore it up with 0 picks, multiple touchdowns, multiple wide receivers. And then through the entirety of the spring, Gunnar was supposed to be pretty limited because he's fresh off of surgery. But if you look back, the dude had the less picks, all of them. Alan Bowman does crazy stuff with the football that the other guys cannot do. That is true. If he can cut down on the turnovers, it's going to be a magical season. Even if he can't cut down on turnovers, ladies and gentlemen, if we put Garrett Rangel in the game to start the entirety of the season with this offensive line, with this running game, and what I think is going to be on the defensive side of the ball, we're still winning more than the over-under. We're still winning at least 8-9 games with Garrett Rangel. And I would argue we win 8-9 games with Gunnar Gundy. So again, either Cody's crazy or it's going to be a really fun football season. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. I mean, that's really all I can say at this point. And the Zane Flores thing, yes, he's ahead of where Gunnar Gundy was at this point right now as a sophomore. Yes, he's ahead of where Garrett Rangel was at this point right now as a true freshman. But he's not better than the other three. I understand the pessimism to some degree after last year. But what I don't understand is people's just, arrogance to look at something that happened a year ago with a terrible O-line in a terrible situation, with terrible play calling, with a lost locker room, with no leadership, with no accountability, how you can say that is going to be a really good indication of what we bring in this year. It makes no sense. So it is what it is. That's what I have to say about that. Another thing, real quick, I want to touch on. So I was on this Twitter space earlier. And to my Twitter people out there, I love you. I do. But I also realized that if I'm on Twitter doing the Twitter spaces, guess what I'm doing? I'm just repeating myself over and over and over. And it's slightly frustrating. You can acquire all of this information, whether it's by watching my show or reading the Daily Oklahoma, Tulsa World, Pokes Report, whatever. You can piece a lot of stuff together. It's one thing to have an opinion. It's another thing to throw your opinion out like it's based in some semblance of reality. That's slightly frustrating. So, I still do some Twitter spaces, but I realized I'm just spinning my tires, ladies and gentlemen. The same stuff I talk about on here is what people talk about on there. So if they are talking about it on there and they have no clue what's going on, then that means they're probably not watching the show. So it is what it is. I still love my Twitter people. I'll still be on Twitter, but I don't know that I'll be running very, very many spaces because it's running in circles and it's me repeating the same stuff I talk about on here. I put in an exorbitant amount of research for a reason. I talk to a lot of people and watch a lot of film for a reason. And that's just to help get the information out there. That's just to make sure that it's not all constrained inside of BPS. Boone Pickens Stadium should not be the end-all, be-all of the dissemination of information. But nobody likes running in circles. If you got kids, you're used to repeating yourself 1,000 times. But we're not talking about kids. All right? Practice? We're not talking about practice. All right, y'all. So I'll skedaddle on off here in a bit to go get to the baseball stadium. But before that, speaking of baseball, segue. You knew that we would circle back around the bend here. Let's talk a little bit about some of the guys that are potentially going to the Major League Draft, as well as some of the guys we have in Summer League and why the Summer League portion of it is very important. So when you look at this year's roster, I think everybody knew coming into the season that both Jerron Watts-Brown and Nolan McClain were gone. I think a lot of us also realized that Rock Riggio was likely also gone. Now, the rest of it is kind of debatable. Marcus Brown is going to be tricky. He can go. He has the talent to go, but I don't think he hit consistently enough this season to put himself in a position to do that. Just me personally. But we will see where he goes. I think he will be drafted. It'll be towards the later part of the draft, in my personal opinion. So hopefully he doesn't, right? Could he be moved elsewhere? Absolutely. Now, you talk about Jerron Watts-Brown. He's somebody else that I think to some degree we mismanaged. I don't know if that's entirely on us because, it takes two to tango, but we bounced him around from the Friday guy, Saturday guy, Friday guy, Sunday guy, weekday guy, closer, middle reliever, starter. We did this all year with him. So I don't think we saw his full potential. So I think there's a decent probability that he returns for another season. I don't see why he wouldn't at least consider it because I know he didn't have the year he wanted to. I know us as a team definitely didn't have the year that he wanted to. You look at the pitching staff. Brian Hendry, obviously that was a loss, and it kind of sucks, right? Because he's an Okie. You thought him coming back to Oklahoma from St. John's, being a Shawnee guy, was going to be a good indication on what he would bring to the table. Stuff happens. I really expect to see a lot out of Ryan Urey coming in this year. Left-hander, 6'7", 230 from Eaton, Colorado. Brendan Phillips, he's draft material, but luckily we've got time for him there. Same with Drew Blake. Isaac Stebbins, we just got a taste of what he could do coming from Cali County by the way of Stillwater High School. Jensen Kizio, I guess potentially could go, right? Transfer in from BYU, but he's only a sophomore. He's got time, and he didn't do enough. So these are a lot of guys that are most likely going to end up in what? In the offseason programs and summer baseball. And this is why baseball, in my opinion, is really, really cool, especially for these young men. It's really the only sport I can think of where you can pretty much go pro in the offseason and then still be able to retain your collegiate eligibility and come back. Like that's a pretty unique thing that baseball has going for it. And when you look at the summer leagues are important because they're playing against other massive big-time competition. They're playing against other Division I athletes, other collegiate baseball players that are vying for the opportunity to potentially play in the major league someday. So when you look at what we have rock and rolling, the first thing you start off with is going to be the Cape Cod League, and that's because we have got a lot of guys with Chatham Anglers, as we should, because if you don't know, Mr. Holliday, Tom Holliday, runs the Chatham Anglers. So not only does it keep everybody close to Oklahoma State University, but it really gives us a good eye into how the development is going this previous season. Last year, Marcus Brown destroyed the Cape Cod League with Coach Holliday on staff. This year, we got Carson Binge there. Carson Binge, a two-way player, obviously fairly reminiscent of Nolan McClain. Should have a pretty comparable career to Nolan McClain. Hopefully he can avoid the injury bug. He's already been through Tommy John. Hopefully we avoided that here for a while. Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis is going to be a good one. Another big-time Okie who got some big moments last season. I expect him to have a pretty good year. It'll be interesting to see what side of Carson Binge we get. You know what I mean? Because him pitching, him in the outfield, him at the plate, all of that two-way capability is going to be massive for us. So hopefully we keep it up in the Cape Cod League, and I do expect to because it's Tom Holliday. We're also going to Aiden Miola there. Aiden Miola should have a big year. I don't think concern's the word, but I have some curiosities about what's going to happen with Tyler Wolfert and Aiden Miola. They're both too good not to play, but they're both really good, and they both deserve to be on the field. And Tyler Wolfert earned his stripes this last season. He did, 100%, no doubt about it. Nolan Schubert, also going to be on that team. He needs no introduction. All-American, Freshman of the Year, Big 12 Newcomer of the Year. He has all that in a bag of chips, as they say in my neck of the woods. And then we already talked a little bit about Brennan Phillips. Brennan Phillips is going to be with the Brewster Whitecaps, same Cape Cod League, so he's going to be competing against a lot of his teammates as he travels. Guys, he's going to be a good one. He had a massive outing there towards the end of the season after really not getting used much during the season. So it's going to be big for him. Jensen Kiesiel, he's another one going to be playing with the Kettlers. Zach Earhart. Zach Earhart, I do think, has the potential to be drafted. But, again, he only got to play the last half of the season. So I think from a statistical perspective, he's got some time still left. Colin Brueggemann is going to be in the Northwoods League along with Brennan Holt and Dominic Reed. They're all going to be with the Wasu Woodchucks. Ian Doherty is going to be with the I can't speak English sometimes. Rochester Honkers, goodness me. Max Galvin also going to be in one of the summer leagues. Bo Sylvester is going to be with Ben Elks in the West Coast League. Make sure that you pay attention to what we have cooking this offseason in baseball. It's not always a surefire indication of what's coming, but it gives you a good idea. So like it if you like it. Dislike it if you don't like it, and let me know what I could have done to potentially make this thing a little bit better for you. I think that's all we're going to have for this one. So until next time, you know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. And thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. All righty, y'all. Later, taters.